Hey guys, welcome back to MDCU News. It is Friday, so I am back again with a same day breakdown of the latest episode of WandaVision. But this episode left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth, so this video is going to be more of a rant with a little bit of breakdown sprinkled in at the end. So if you want to just skip to the breakdown part, I'll drop the timestamps for that in the description. So, right off the bat, we see that this episode is only 37 minutes. But then again, it's not because we get these 7-minute long credits at the end of the episode, which just feels like cannon fodder to try and get us to think we're getting more than we actually are. And honestly, when Marvel first announced they would be using Disney Plus to air original live action content, I was excited because streaming allows for riskier and more in depth content like WandaVision to have life where it otherwise wouldn't. But for the past 11 years, the MCU formula has been tweaked and perfected to fit the movie format. And with WandaVision, we see that this transition to TV hasn't been too great. My biggest complaint definitely has to be with the spacing, specifically the budget and the plot. Because if you remember, after the first few WandaVision trailers hit the streets, it was also reported that the show would have an overall budget of $225 million for a 9 episode series. And just to put that in perspective, that is almost $100 million more than the but. Can you stop? I'm sorry, I live in New York City, so there's always background noise. But anyway, so that's almost $100 million more than the budget of Captain Marvel. And yet, I'm not seeing that translating into the show. So far, the special effects for Wanda's powers have been pretty small scale. The set of the show isn't anything over the top, and most of the episodes were shot using old school filming methods, which have to be significantly cheaper than what we'd be used to. So, what is this $225 million budget going to? We have to assume that they're using and saving the majority of this big budget for the fight scenes at the conclusion of this show, which is probably going to be the last 2 episodes. And that works with the big conclusion or the big finale of movies. But with a TV show where you have almost 2 months between the start and the end of the series, it just feels dragged out, especially when you purposely add these huge cliffhangers to each episode. Now, don't get me wrong, cliffhangers are a great storytelling tool that help build suspense. But when you purposely center the entire episode around leading up to this cliffhanger at the end, just to string viewers along to the final act of the show, it feels cheap. Especially considering the problems Disney Plus has had with retaining subscribers because of their lack of original content. Whew. But with that aside, even though the episode overall in the grand scheme was a little bit of a disappointment, I don't think it in itself was bad, and it actually gave us a lot of hints and clues about what's going on in Westview. So let's get into that. So the show starts off with a classic early 2000s intro, something similar to Malcolm in the Middle. And if you pay close attention, in the title card introducing Agnes, you see she has naughty bedazzled on the butt part of her pants, another hint at her mischievous intentions. And notice how her name came up in the same shot introducing Tommy and Billy, as if they were some sort of trio. Again, pointing to the likelihood that Agnes is really on a secret agenda trying to get the kids for whatever nefarious plot she has going on in the background. So then we see the updated home that's set to match the new decade, and Pietro is sleeping on the couch. And from the conversation between Billy and Tommy, we see that in this sitcom, Wanda has set Pietro up to play the classic deadbeat but cool uncle role. And then we're introduced to the Scarlet Witch in her full comic accurate suit under the guise of being a Sokovian fortune teller, which prompts Pietro to mention the time the two of them got typhus. And Wanda says that she doesn't remember it that way. Now, this is key because Pietro seems to have memory of the outside world and his past life, unlike Vision, but they don't seem to be too accurate. Possibly because he truly is Mephisto in disguise, trying to dupe Wanda into trusting him. And when Wanda points out that she didn't remember it like this, Pietro tells her it was probably because she has a tendency to suppress a lot of trauma. And this is our first of many times that Pietro very passive aggressively shows that he is very much aware of the reality of what's going on, but chooses to just go along with it. So next we see Vision come down the stairs in his comic accurate suit, which Wanda tricked him into wearing by saying it's a Mexican wrestler's costume. And Vision points out that he had to wear this because there were no other clothes in his closet, and then immediately goes back to playing along, showing that he is still semi aware of the fact that Wanda is in control, but is playing along because, like we saw last week, a direct confrontation with her won't really get anything done. But instead, he plans on trying to get a better feel of what everything is like in the rest of Westview by playing it cool. So then we see Pietro stepping up as the father figure of the night and joins everyone else, including Tommy, in wearing their comic accurate suits. And then back outside the bubble, we see a very interesting power struggle between Hayward and Rambeau, who's trying to stop Hayward from going nuclear on Wanda. And Hayward mentions how Monica has constantly been advocating for superheroes because of her past with Carol Danvers, which is like the third seed that has been planted for their relationship, which we will see developed in Captain Marvel 2. And Hayward shows us another dimension of how the blip has affected humanity, saying that those who survived were and still very much are deeply emotionally scarred in ways that those who blipped could never really grasp. So then he gets everyone's favorite trio removed from the base, but not with much success as Monica and Wu put the hurt on some guards and slip away. Then back in the bubble, Wanda and company start trick-or-treating, and Quicksilver tells Billy and Tommy, "Release hell, evil spawn," which, come on. Throughout the entire show, they have been giving us really obvious dialogue, revealing exactly what's going on. This particular line basically confirming that, much like in House of M, Billy and Tommy are the products of Mephisto, who, as of now, most likely seems to be Quicksilver himself, but I have some doubts about that, which we'll explain later. So then Wanda questions Pietro, testing him out as to why he looks different and why his memory isn't always there. Then we get our most interesting commercial yet, with this shark offering a stranded kid yo magic, which is clearly a metaphor for how Wanda's powers have given her a way to survive through her trauma. Yet the child in the commercial, who seems to be a stand-in for Wanda, dies trying to open the container. Now, so far the commercials have been in chronological order for the events of Wanda's life, but by the events of this commercial, she should already have been given her powers. And yet we see this shark figure offer them to her. Now, this is suggesting that perhaps the powers and abilities Wanda is using now are new abilities that someone gave to her, and she thinks these powers will help her cope with the death of Pietro and Vision, but really it's destroying her in the inside. Now, as to who gave her these abilities, I'm not sure. There may be an outside third person, because if Mephisto is Pietro and he's inside the bubble trying to figure out how Wanda did all this and drain her powers, it wouldn't make sense that he is also the one who gave them to her in the first place. But then perhaps maybe Pietro isn't Mephisto, but really is just another manifestation of Wanda's powers, just this time one she created by accident, which could feed into the possibility of her creating mutants in the future. So then we see that Billy has developed his own ability of super speed, and Wanda warns him and Tommy not to go past Ellis Avenue, which is the last border street of town. But then back outside the bubble, Darcy is able to figure out that Hayward is tracking Vision, which makes sense since they seem to have been testing and ripping him apart, likely to make him a weapon from what we saw in last week's episode. Then we see that Vision's travels have brought him to the edge of town, where it seems that Wanda's powers don't fully reach there, since all the residents there are completely frozen. And he runs into Agnes and wakes her up, and what the heck? She acts just like Norm did when he was awakened, confused and hopeless, but she has no inside information, no cryptic dialogue, or anything that hints to her really being that comic accurate Agnetha Harkness who's working for Mephisto. Instead, she seems like just another victim, which maybe all this time Marvel has been playing us. And we as the audience have been reading too far into Agnes's character. But I can't believe that. And perhaps that little conversation with Vision was Agnes really putting up a front to throw him off her trail, which then leads Vision to try and escape Westview. But on the other side of the Hex, Monica is planning on meeting her secret contact to find her way back into the Hex, which Darcy warns her of, since her last two trips in and out has caused her DNA to change. Now, this is our first major hint at the X-Men coming to the MCU. We see that the barrier has the possibility to alter people's DNA, but I'm guessing that there's still going to need to be some sort of catalyst that triggers mutant powers. Much like how the Mind Stone triggered something that was already dormant within Wanda, as confirmed by Shuri's Wakanda files. Then we get this really important conversation between Pietro and Wanda, where they talk openly about how Wanda created the Hex, and Pietro tells her, "I'm not some stranger and I'm not your husband. You can talk to me." Now, saying "I'm not some stranger" seems to reference Monica and how she was trying to get answers out of Wanda before. But how would Pietro know about that? And as I said before, him being Mephisto is starting not to add up. So I'm switching my theory to think that maybe he's some kind of agent for Hayward, sent in to try and manipulate Wanda into getting her children so that he could weaponize them, much like he tried to weaponize Vision after Endgame. From Darcy's searching, we see that he definitely does have some hidden agenda going on. And perhaps it's that he's in cahoots with Admiral Ross, like I talked about in my last episode breakdown, so check that out. And the two of them are trying to establish their own government version of the Avengers, which could be why Falcon and the Winter Soldier is placed so close to the end of WandaVision, since we know that that show is going to follow the events of the US government trying to push their own brand of Captain America. So perhaps WandaVision is setting up this Thunderbolts-esque plotline, which is going to be further explored in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So then we get to this episode's big reveal. Vision finally trying to escape Westview, but as we all saw coming, that doesn't last because outside of the Hex, Vision isn't a real boy. And this triggers the first sign of Billy's telepathic powers, where he sees or hears that Vision is in trouble. And Pietro makes another sly mark, which this time Wanda doesn't let go so easy. And to finally put an end to the sword problem, she goes full on Scarlet Witch and starts to expand the Hex, bringing in all the sword agents and their base, instantly converting it into whatever fits into the set, including Darcy. And before we get to see what happens to Hayward, Monica, and friends, the show cuts out. Now, episode 6 was the last episode of the second act of the series. So for the next 3 episodes, start expecting things to wrap up. With next week's episode 7, we'll probably get that flashback episode of everything that happened between Endgame and the beginning of WandaVision. And by episode 8, we'll reveal who Mephisto is, or whoever the big bad is, of the show. And then everything will conclude with a dramatic episode 9, which is going to feature this big, long, big budget fight scene, and will probably showcase the arrival of the mysterious character that Elizabeth Olsen likened to Luke Skywalker and Paul Bettany said he's been looking forward to working with, who I'm guessing is Doctor Strange. And of course, the finale will have the world-changing events that set up Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. So that is all I've got to say for today. And if you're still here at the end of my video, congratulations and thank you. And as always, please feel free to drop a like, comment, and subscribe to help give me the will to continue working on these videos. Peace out, folks.